The drive back from Minneapolis to Nashville should have taken just under 2 hours. I'd left the conference early, skipping the closing dinner, because I'd promised my daughter I'd be home before her bedtime. She'd asked me 3 times before I left, "You'll be back for bath time, Mommy?" And I had said yes each time with the kind of certainty only a mother can fake when she's not entirely sure her flight won't be delayed. It wasn't delayed. I landed at 6:42, grabbed my carry-on from the overhead bin before half the plane had unbuckled, and was in a rideshare by 7:10. My daughter was 5 years old. 5-year-olds needed routines, baths, and the specific kind of bedtime story that only worked when the right person read it. I had been gone 3 days for a medical staffing conference, and even from 400 miles away, I could feel her waiting for me. My husband had texted me at 2 in the afternoon. Jade stopped by with the kids. "Gonna grab pizza, don't worry about dinner." I'd read it between sessions and sent back a thumbs up without thinking twice. My sister-in-law came over sometimes. She had twin boys, 7 years old, loud and physical in the way boys that age tend to be. My daughter usually hid in her room when they visited. I'd always thought it was shyness. I was wrong about a lot of things. The house was lit up when the rideshare turned onto our street. Every downstairs window glowed. I could hear music even from the driveway, something with bass that vibrated faintly through the front door. I paid the driver and stood on the front porch for a moment with my rolling bag listening. Laughter. Adult laughter. And underneath it, the crash and shriek of small children running. I let myself in. The living room looks like a frat house had moved in. My coffee table, the one I'd saved for, the solid oak one, was covered in pizza boxes, 2-liter soda bottles, and a scattered deck of cards. My sister-in-law was stretched across my couch with a glass of wine, her feet tucked under her, laughing at something my husband had just said. Her boys were chasing each other through the kitchen. One of them skidded across my hardwood floor in his socks, slammed into the refrigerator, and kept going without even checking if anything had broken. My husband saw me first. His smile shifted, just slightly, just enough. "Hey, you're early." He stood up, and I noticed he moved between me and the room like he was trying to manage my field of vision. "My flight was on time," I said. My voice was even, measured. "Where's Sophie?" My sister-in-law looked up. She had the relaxed expression of someone who had been comfortable in my house for a long time. "She went to her room," she said, waving a hand. She was being a little moody about the boys playing with her dollhouse. I told her she needed to learn to share. She'll get over it. Something cold moved through me. Not anger yet, something quieter than that. A kind of stillness that comes right before you understand something you don't want to understand. "When did she go to her room?" My husband glanced at the clock on the microwave. "Like an hour ago? An hour and a half, maybe. An hour and a half." My 5-year-old had been alone in her room for an hour and a half, while adults drank wine and played cards downstairs. I left my rolling bag where it stood and walked up the stairs. Sophie's bedroom was dark. Not just lights off dark. Dark in that specific, heavy way that means a child has been alone for too long in a space that stopped feeling safe. Her nightlight wasn't on. I pushed the door open further and let the hallway light fall across the room. She wasn't in her bed. I checked the closet. Empty. I checked under the bed. Nothing. I stood in the doorway for a moment with my heart doing something irregular against my ribs, and then I noticed the door to her ensuite bathroom was closed. I knocked softly. "Sophie, baby, are you in there?" A sound. Small, like a breath being held and then released. "It's Mommy. I'm home." Silence. Then the small scrape of something shifting on tile. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. I pushed it open. She was sitting on the bathroom floor with her back against the bathtub, her knees pulled up to her chest, holding her stuffed elephant, the gray one she'd named Peanut, pressed against her face. The bathroom was completely dark. She'd been sitting in the dark. Her eyes were swollen from crying and her cheeks were streaked with dried tears and her little socks had slid halfway off her feet. "Mama." Her voice was almost nothing. I was on the floor beside her, in one movement. I pulled her into my lap and she came apart immediately. Not the loud kind of crying that children do when they want something, but the quiet, exhausted kind that comes after someone has already cried everything out and has been sitting alone for a long time just waiting. "I'm here," I said into her hair. "I'm here. I've got you." It took a few minutes before she could tell me what had happened. Piece by piece, the way 5-year-olds put language together when they're scared. The boys had wanted to play with her dollhouse. She'd said no because the last time they'd visited, one of them had broken the tiny dining room chair that came with it and nobody had apologized or replaced it. My sister-in-law had told her she was being selfish and needed to go to her room and think about how to be a better sharer. My husband had said nothing. Sophie had come upstairs. She'd turned off her light because she didn't want anyone to know she was crying. She'd been in the bathroom because it felt smaller, safer. "Did Daddy come to check on you?" I asked. She shook her head against my shoulder. "Did anyone come up?" Another small shake. An hour and a half. My daughter had been alone in a dark bathroom for an hour and a half and not one adult in my house had come upstairs to check on her. I carried her back to her room, tucked Peanut in beside her, and sat on the edge of her bed until she stopped shaking. I turned her nightlight on. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. Then I kissed her forehead, told her I'd be right back, and walked downstairs with a composure I did not feel. My sister-in-law saw my face and straightened slightly. My husband stood up again, the way people stand up when they sense they're about to be held accountable for something. "She was in the bathroom," I said. "In the dark. For almost 2 hours. "Oh, she's fine," my sister-in-law started. "She's not fine." My voice was quiet. Quieter than I intended, actually, which I think scared my husband more than if I'd raised it. She was sitting on the floor in the dark holding her stuffed animal. She'd been crying alone for so long she ran out of tears. My husband dragged a hand through his hair. "Harper, come on." She threw a fit over a toy. "Her name," I said, "is Sophie, and she is 5 years old, and nobody in this house came to check on her." My sister-in-law set down her wine glass with a small, deliberate click. "I don't think it's appropriate for you to come in here and start attacking people who were just trying to help." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked at my husband, who was looking at the floor. "I want everyone out of my house," I said. "Right now. Both boys, all the pizza boxes, and you." My sister-in-law made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Are you serious? Marcus, are you going to let her talk to me like—" "Now," I said. She left. She made it theatrical, gathering things slowly, sighing loudly, kissing my husband on the cheek in a way that took exactly 1 beat too long. The boys tore through the room grabbing shoes and jackets without any awareness of what had just happened, which was the only grace in any of it. The door closed. My husband turned to me. "That was incredibly rude," he said. "She was doing me a favor coming over." "A favor," I repeated. "You were gone for 3 days, Harper. I needed—" "Our daughter sat alone in a dark bathroom for 2 hours because your sister told her she was selfish and you did nothing." I picked up my rolling bag from where I'd left it by the door. "I'm going to go be with Sophie. We'll talk when she's asleep." We'll talk when she was asleep. We did not talk when she was asleep. I lay next to my daughter in her narrow bed and listened to her breathe and thought about the way my husband had stood there. Not defensive, not sorry, but annoyed. Annoyed that I'd disrupted the evening. Annoyed that I'd been inconvenient. I thought about other things, too. The way my sister-in-law had been so comfortable on my couch. The way she'd said I told her she needed to go to her room like she had the authority to discipline my child. The way my husband had said. She threw a fit over a toy as if my daughter's feelings were an administrative problem he didn't have time to process. At 10:30, I picked up my phone and called my college friend Diane, who was a family law attorney in Atlanta. "Tell me what happened," she said, because she's the kind of person who never says hello when something is clearly wrong. I told her. She was quiet for a moment. "Okay, is this an isolated incident or a pattern?" I thought about that. The last 6 months. My sister-in-law at our house every week. My husband's growing irritability with Sophie, the way he'd say she was too sensitive or too clingy, always when my sister-in-law was around. The way Vanessa had started offering parenting opinions I hadn't asked for. The way my husband had stopped offending me when she did. Pattern, I said. I'm going to give you a name, Diane said. James Holloway. He's in Nashville. He's the best family attorney in that city, and he owes me a favor. Call him first thing tomorrow. Tonight, do not say another word to your husband about any of this. Do not fight. Do not engage. If he starts something, leave the room. Diane, I'm serious, Harper. The moment you're thinking about your future, he becomes the opposition. Everything you say will be used to paint you as unstable and reactive. You came home and lost your temper at his sister. That's already his version. Don't give him any more material. I lay in the dark next to my daughter for a long time after I hung up. At midnight, my husband knocked softly on Sophie's door and opened it a crack. You coming to bed? I'll sleep in here tonight, I said. She needs me. He stood there for a moment, then he closed the door. The next morning, I called James Holloway at 8:03. He had a mid-morning opening, and I took it. I dropped Sophie at school, went to the meeting, and sat across from a man who had seen everything and had the calm of someone completely impossible to shock. I told him all of it. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he made a single note on his legal pad, looked up at me, and said, I want to be very direct with you. What you're describing about your daughter, left alone, distressed, parent failed to check on her. That becomes our opening. It's not dramatic by legal standards, but it establishes a pattern of your husband deprioritizing Sophie's welfare when his sister is involved. Do you have any reason to believe this has happened before when you were away? The realization moved through me slowly. I travel for work once a month. And you've assumed she was fine because he never told you otherwise. I hadn't even thought to question it. I felt sick. James told me not to move out of the house, that leaving could complicate property rights. He told me not to confront my husband further, not to discuss the situation in front of Sophie, and not to respond to anything my sister-in-law said or texted. He filed paperwork that afternoon. A formal petition for divorce and an emergency motion establishing my role as Sophie's primary caregiver. My husband found out at 6:15 that evening when the process server knocked on our door. I was upstairs giving Sophie a bath when I heard the front door open, and then a sound I hadn't heard from my husband before. Something between disbelief and genuine panic. Like a person who has just looked down and realized they've been standing on ice for a long time and the ice has cracked. Harper! His voice came up the stairs. Harper, what is this? I called through the bathroom door. Sophie's in the bath. I'll be down in a few minutes. I took my time. I dried my daughter off, found her pajamas, and read her 2 chapters of the book we were in the middle of. When I came downstairs, my husband was sitting at the kitchen table with the papers in his hands, and he looked diminished, like something structural had come loose. You filed for divorce, he said. Yes, without saying anything, without even trying to talk to me. We've been talking for 3 years, I said. Or I have, because of last night? That's insane, Harper. Vanessa was just, this isn't about last night. I kept my voice level. I need you to understand that. Last night was when I stopped pretending. James said to tell you that all further communication about the proceedings should go through him directly. I set his card on the table. You should get a lawyer. He called me 14 times that night. I let everyone go to voicemail. The texts came in a cascade. Some angry, some apologetic, some confusing in their logic. You're punishing me for caring about my sister. Sophie is fine. You're overreacting. I'll do anything. Call me back. This is cruel. Call me back. I screenshotted every one and forwarded them to James with the subject line, First Night, FYI. James's response came 3 minutes later. Perfect. Don't respond to any of them. The next 10 days were a particular kind of exhausting, the kind where you're performing normalcy for your child while your actual life disassembles itself quietly in the background. I moved through the house in a state of controlled calm. My husband moved through it like a man who couldn't understand why the rules had changed. He tried, several times, to have a conversation. I referred him to James each time. He took to leaving apology notes on the kitchen counter. I collected them for evidence. The call from my sister-in-law came on a Thursday afternoon while Sophie was at school and I was working from home. "I think we should talk," she said. "I don't think that's a good idea. Marcus is falling apart." Her voice was controlled, but I knew her well enough to hear the effort in it. "Whatever you think happened, you were destroying this family over a misunderstanding, and I need you to hear me say that." "I'm going to stop you there," I said. And then, because something calculated had taken over the part of me that was still afraid, I said, "Actually, why don't you come over? Half an hour. We can talk in person." I hung up and opened the voice memo app on my phone before I even set it down. She arrived in 22 minutes. She came in with the confidence of someone who expected to win the argument she'd prepared. I offered her water. She declined. We sat at the kitchen table and she began by telling me in careful, measured tones that I was being irrational, that Marcus loved me, that what I was doing to Sophie by disrupting the family structure was worse than anything my sister-in-law had ever done. "He hasn't worked a full-time job in 18 months, I said. She faltered, just slightly. "He's been figuring things out. Some people need. I've been paying the mortgage, the insurance, Sophie's school, all of it. Alone. For a year and a half, while he figured things out. That's what partnerships are. What has your brother contributed to this partnership, Vanessa? Name one thing." Her jaw tightened. I watched the shift happen. The calculated warmth leaving, the real thing underneath appearing. "You know your problem?" she said. "You've always needed to be in control. Marcus told me. You've made him feel small for years because you make more money and you can't let him forget it. You drove him to this." "To what exactly?" She caught herself. "But too late." She caught herself. "But too late. To needing someone in his corner," she said, recovering. "Someone who actually supports him instead of managing him." "And you've been that person," I said. "I've been his sister. In my house, on my couch, with my daughter sent to sit alone in the dark while you two had a nice evening." Her eyes narrowed. "Be very careful about what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating what happened." She stood up. Her voice dropped, went cold. "You want to go to court? Fine. We'll go to court. And when they start asking about the kind of mother who travels every month and leaves her child with a father who apparently can't be trusted, when they see the texts you've sent Marcus over the years, controlling, critical, belittling, I know what I saw. I'll testify to it. Think about that before you keep pushing this." I stirred as well. I walked to the front door and opened it. "Time's up," I said. After she left, I sat on the couch for a long moment. Then I took my phone out of my pocket and stopped the recording. I played back the last 40 seconds. Her voice, clear as anything. "I know what I saw. I'll testify to it." I emailed the file to James with 3 words. "Check your inbox." His response came in 11 minutes. "Harper, you are remarkable. Do not tell anyone about this recording. Do not let your husband know you have it. Come in tomorrow morning." The hearing was set for a Tuesday at 9 a.m. My husband's attorney, a man named Bryce Kettner, who had a loud voice and an aggressively confident handshake, had filed a counter-motion for equal temporary custody, citing my frequent travel schedule and what he described as a pattern of emotional unavailability. I sat next to James in a courtroom that smelled like old paper and floor wax, and I pressed my hands flat against my thighs to keep them still. Kettner made his opening argument with theatrical passion. My husband was devoted, present, deeply involved in his daughter's life. My travel schedule constituted chronic neglect of parental duties. The incident my client described, Sophie's time alone, was simply a child receiving appropriate discipline for inappropriate behavior administered by a caring aunt. He used the word devoted 7 times. I counted. Judge Patricia Mercer was a woman in her late 50s with the face of someone who had stopped being impressed by theatrical passion a long time ago. She listened. She made notes. When Kettner finished, she looked at James. Mr. Holloway. James stood up slowly. He has the gift of making silence feel like something is about to happen. Your Honor, I'll be brief. My client returned from a 3-day work trip to find her 5-year-old daughter alone in a dark bathroom on the floor, crying, where she had been for nearly 2 hours. No adult in the home had checked on her. When my client asked her husband where their daughter was, he initially didn't know. He told her not to overreact. He paused. We have Sophie's statement, taken with the child advocate present, which corroborates every element of this account. We also have something else. Kettner sat up straighter. My husband, at the table to my left, went very still. With the court's permission, I'd like to play a recording made 3 days ago, a conversation between my client and her sister-in-law, who has been identified by opposing counsel as a material witness in this case. Kettner was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is ambush tactics. The witness was not deposed. The witness offered herself as a witness, James said calmly, in the recording. Judge Mercer held up one hand. I'll hear it. Proceed. The recording played. I watched my sister-in-law's voice fill the courtroom. Her certainty, her threat, the specific phrase, I know what I saw, I'll testify to it, delivered with the confidence of a woman who thought she was winning. Then the other part, quieter, almost slipped past. You drove him to this, and the implication hanging in the silence before she caught herself. When it ended, the courtroom was very still. My husband had his face turned slightly away from me. I couldn't read his expression. Kettner whispered something to him urgently. My husband shook his head once. Judge Mercer looked down at her notes for a long moment. Then she looked up. Mr. Kettner, your client's witness has on record indicated an intent to provide testimony that she herself has characterized as retaliatory, that is, disqualifying. Additionally, the content of this recording, combined with the child's own account, paints a picture that is very difficult to square with the narrative of devoted co-parenting your opening argument presented. She turned to James. Motion granted. Primary residential custody to the petitioner. Respondent's parenting time suspended pending psychological evaluation. I'm also issuing a no-contact order between the respondent's sister and the minor child. The gavel came down. I breathed for what felt like the first time in 2 weeks. It was 3 weeks later that I found the accounts. I'd been going through our joint tax documents. James had requested 5 years of financial records, and I noticed something that hadn't registered when I'd glanced at it before. 18 months of automatic transfers, each one $400 from our joint savings. The payee listed was something called Meridian Futures, LLC. I called my office manager, Trish, who had done bookkeeping for 15 years before she'd come to work with me. Can you look something up? I asked. A company called Meridian Futures, LLC. Delaware registration. She called me back in 20 minutes. It's a shell company. Registered agent is a law firm in Wilmington. Director of record is listed as a Marcus Webb. She paused. Is that your husband? I sat down on the edge of the kitchen counter. Trish, I said carefully, does it list any other officers? A pause while she scrolled. There's a co-director, a Vanessa Webb Kerr. My sister-in-law. Of course, I went through the tax documents more carefully that evening. The $400 monthly were just the beginning. There were wire transfers I'd never noticed. I paid a bookkeeper for our household accounts, and I realized with a cold, creeping horror that my husband had been making transfers I'd never looked at because I trusted him and we had separate logins, and I had been the kind of person who assumed the people in her home were not stealing from her. Over 22 months, $64,000. Maybe more. I hadn't reached the bottom of the documents yet. I called James at 8:15 that night. I found something, I said. He told me to stop touching the documents, to email him photos of everything exactly as I'd found it. To not let my husband know. This moves us out of family court, he said. His voice was different than it had been, more focused, more serious in a way that made me grip the phone harder. This is potentially criminal. Wire fraud. Possibly money laundering depending on where the money went. I'm going to make some calls tomorrow. This may involve federal investigators. How much do you think? Don't speculate yet. Get me the documents. What it involved, as it turned out, was a great deal more than $64,000. Meridian Futures was a real estate investment vehicle that my sister-in-law had created 18 months ago, at roughly the same time she'd started coming to my house every week. She'd been selling fractional interests in a short-term rental property portfolio that didn't exist. My husband had funneled my money into her fund. Several other investors had done the same, lured by projected returns and quarterly reports that James's forensic accountant described as professionally produced fiction. The FBI opened a formal investigation 6 weeks after I handed James the documents. I was at work on a Wednesday afternoon, a patient consult I'd been preparing for all morning, when my phone lit up with a text from Trish. Turn on any local news channel, right now. I excused myself, stepped into the hallway, and pulled up the local NBC affiliate on my phone. The footage was from a street I recognized. Our street. My house. 2 dark SUVs in the driveway, agents in navy blue windbreakers at the front door, and then the footage I hadn't expected. My husband and my sister-in-law being walked out together, hands cuffed behind them. My husband had his head down. My sister-in-law was staring straight ahead with an expression that was either defiance or shock. From the angle of the camera, I couldn't tell which. The Chiron read, Nashville Socopla arrested in federal real estate fraud part. Probe investors allegedly defrauded of more than $1.2 million. I leaned against the hallway wall and stared at my phone screen. James called at 4. He walked me through the charges: wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. He told me my husband's attorney had already contacted him about a plea arrangement. He told me to prepare a statement expressing shock and full cooperation, which he had already drafted and would release on my behalf. He told me the civil recovery process would take time, but that my funds were traceable and attachable. He also told me, almost as an afterthought, you should probably go see your daughter. I picked Sophie up from school at 3:15. She came running out of her classroom with a drawing in her hand, a house with a big sun and what appeared to be an elephant standing in the yard. That's Peanut, she told me seriously, pointing at the elephant. I put him outside because he likes the sun. That's very thoughtful, I said. That night, I gave her a bath and read to her and stayed until she was fully asleep. I sat on the edge of her bed in the quiet and thought about the bathroom floor. I thought about the moment I'd pushed open that door and seen her there in the dark, holding on to her stuffed animal with the determined grip of a child who has decided that if the world won't hold her, she will hold herself. I thought about all the things I hadn't seen because I'd been looking the wrong direction. My husband's plea came through 5 weeks later. 42 months. He signed over every marital asset without objection, which his attorney characterized in the paperwork as a gesture of good faith, and which I understood as the act of a man who knew he had nothing left to negotiate with. Parental rights formally terminated as part of the agreement. I didn't ask for that. He offered it, which told me everything I needed to understand about what Sophie had meant to him when weighed against what else was on the table. My sister-in-law took a deal for 28 months. Cooperation discount. A letter arrived at my new apartment. I'd moved out of the house the week after the arrest because some spaces become something else entirely, addressed in handwriting I recognized. I held it for a long time. Then I opened it. I don't know why I'm writing this. I don't expect anything. I want you to know, I think about Sophie every day, and I'm sorry for what I did to her and what I did to you. I told myself I was providing for our future. I know that's not what it was. Some days I don't know how I became the kind of person who put his daughter in that position. Take care of her. Tell her, someday, if you ever can, that her dad was a coward who loved her in the only broken way he knew how. I read it twice. Then I folded it back into the envelope, walked to the kitchen, and burned it in the stainless steel sink. I watched the paper go black and curl and turn to ash, and I ran the faucet and washed it down the drain. The divorce was final on a Thursday in November. 3 lines in the judge's closing summary, a signature, a stamp. 7 years of marriage, and it ended in 11 minutes. I signed my copy, thanked James, and walked out into a cold, bright afternoon that tasted like something new. 6 months later, I am sitting on the front porch of a house in Asheville, North Carolina, watching my daughter play in the backyard. We have a garden that is mostly weeds right now because we've only been here 2 months, and we're still figuring out what grows here. Sophie has decided the weeds are wildflowers, and I've decided she's probably right. She found a stick this morning that she announced is a magic wand, but also a hiking stick. It depends on a situation, and she's been carrying it everywhere since breakfast. Right now, she's using it to direct Peanut, who she has propped in the garden bed, toward what she has described as a very important flower. Peanut is very patient with her. I watch her and feel something that I used to mistake for other things: happiness confused for relief, peace mistaken for just the absence of crisis. I know the difference now. This is the real thing, uncomplicated and whole. My phone buzzes on the porch railing. It's a message from the director of the Women's Resource Center downtown. I've been volunteering there on Wednesday afternoons, and they've asked if I'd be willing to speak at their April fundraiser. Something about financial safety for women leaving difficult situations, recognizing the warning signs, how to protect yourself when the person who should be your partner is quietly working against you. I type back, "I'd be honored." Sophie comes running across the yard with Peanut under one arm and the stick one in the other hand, breathless and fully alive. "Mommy! I found an actual real wildflower, a yellow one. Come see." I set my phone down. "Show me," I say. She grabs my hand with both of hers and pulls, and I let her pull me across the yard toward her yellow flower, toward the garden that is mostly weeds, toward the life that is ours, entirely, completely, finally ours, and for the first time in as long as I can remember, there is nowhere else I need to be.